topic this week is Zack Snyder's Justice League. Now, I'm not as fucking fanboy-ish about this as some people. When it comes to Marvel and DC, I love both pretty equally. In cinema, though, I'm a cinema boy. I'm a cinema guy. So, Marvel is winning, that fight. Marvel is just, there's no denying that they're on top when it comes to superhero cinema. You just can't deny it. With that being said, anytime a new outing in the DC Comics universe comes out, whether it's a movie or a TV show or anything, I'm hyped for it, I'm excited for it, I look forward to it, I watch it, and I reflect and take it in and just what did I think? Because I'm always hoping for any of them to be good. Even if continuity-wise they fucked up, right? Continuity-wise they didn't build some universe like Marvel did. But as I've said in the past, they've shied away from trying to do that. They will sometimes do it, and then they will most of the time not. So we have this storyline that Snyder has created for us, right? And it has been it's been getting added to here and there. Aquaman, right? The Flash is part of that, obviously, because it's the same Flash. Wonder Woman, any of the Wonder Woman films, they're part of that little continuity. Batman vs. Superman, Man of Steel, and Justice League. Now, Justice League was always meant to be a multiple film thing with Snyder. I'll get into the history of Justice League in a second. But I wanted to point out that just because I lean towards Marvel does not mean that I was not super psyched to watch this, and I was. The thing is, my expectations for it were not super high. I did not think it would be that much better than what we saw in 2017, because why really would it be? And then I realized how wrong I was. Let's get into it. I love, it's cool too at the end. This whole setup for what could be and potentially be, right? 6 chairs at the center of the room, but room for more. That whole epilogue is something worth talking about. Right off the bat, though, I know I should jump right into all the reasons this film exceeded my expectations, especially when comparing it to the film we got in 2017. But I want to talk about the way that Zack actually put it together and why I thought that benefited the film most of all. But I will say this, after watching Zack's version of this film, what this story was actually supposed to be is clear. It made me drop my rating of the 2017 version, actually, and it made me give this one a better rating. After having seen the whole thing. I realize now that I liked parts of the 2017 Justice League, but only because those parts that I liked were the parts that Snyder filmed. And now we're getting the whole piece of the pie. Or the whole pie, not a piece of it. Yeah, not a piece of it, but the whole thing. Zack Snyder has always been an interesting filmmaker for me to follow in general, because I've always had mixed feelings about his work. Some of his films I really like, some I really could do without. But I've never really loved anything he's made. But I have never denied the fact that he's a visionary director. His style, his perspective, they've always thrilled me. While most people really liked 300 or even loved it, and maybe hated Watchmen, because that was there was like a mixed feeling about Watchmen. I wasn't big on 300, and I really liked Watchmen. So I was kind of reversed in that regard. And Man of Steel, although flawed, still made me hopeful at the time for a DC superhero slate with Snyder at the helm. I was excited. Then, of course, I was super disappointed by Batman vs. Superman. I just was. I was a part of that group of people, and that was a big group of people that were just underwhelmed by that film. It just didn't do it. It didn't execute. It didn't come across the way I expected it to. And it's not that I didn't want. I wanted it to be good. I wanted to love it, When a version of Justice League came out in 2017, because of seeing Batman vs Superman, I wasn't totally thrilled or looking. I wasn't like, oh my god, I can't wait for Justice League, because I didn't like Batman vs Superman. So I wasn't really. I was like, whatever, dude. I'm gonna watch it, of course, and I'm sure I'll still like it and enjoy it, but I'm not gonna. It's not gonna. I'm not gonna love it. It's again. Once again, I'm not gonna love it, and I want to love it. You know what I mean? I want to love. Like, ever since this whole thing too, Justice League was kind of the end of Warner Brothers pushing a cinematic universe. They were pushing it up until that point. Then after that, they embraced the idea of maybe a multiverse and like just kind of making individual stories and just kind of going with the flow, doing anything they want with the characters and the IP that they have. And it was a good decision because there have been good ones. Now that's worth pointing out. I have loved, actually, some of the solo or individual stories. I loved Joker. I loved Wonder Woman. I loved Birds of Prey. I want to love the Batman when it comes out. But it's, but before that, right, it was this whole pushing, trying to make a cinematic universe like Marvel and not executing it properly thing that they were doing. I wanted to love all of them. I wanted to love Justice League, but I knew I wasn't gonna. And then, of course, it ended up being that the Justice League that came out wasn't even Zack Snyder's Justice League. But at the time, I thought, well, it's probably not that much different, right? And I don't love it. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't like even that good, really. It was okay. And so, lo and behold, the long journey that Zack Snyder went through to get this made. Basically, when I found out that it was Joss Whedon and the whole thing, I thought to myself, okay, maybe there's Zack's version out there. Maybe it is better. But I never had any hope. It didn't thrill me enough to be like, I can't wait I want Zack Snyder's. And I hope it comes out. Because I just, at that point, was like, kind of over it, man. When they weren't getting it done, DC. It actually, I looked forward to Zack Snyder's version more when they started to change their approach to DC films. After the version that came out in 2017. But here was an instance where I was genuinely shocked at how much I enjoyed this movie. Okay? It might be Zack Snyder's best work. This is where we're at now. When I saw that it was announced that it was going to come out this year and everything, it's like, how much better could it really be? And then my expectations were exceeded. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm getting into what I said I wouldn't yet right now. Am I? Yeah, I don't want to talk about the journey of Snyder making this yet. Let's talk about plot, character, structure, that kind of thing. I said how the way that this came out, the way that Zack put it together, was extremely beneficial for why it turned out as good as it did. The 4-hour cut is a version of the film that HBO would allow because of its streaming platform coming to life. And the fact that the fans were demanding this cut so much allowed Snyder to actually have complete freedom here to keep everything he wanted to keep. Most cuts of films would probably be 4 hours anyway, if studios let directors keep everything that they want to keep. In this case, Zack was allowed to do this. And I think it benefited the film. Granted, I'll get into why I think the epilogue was a little much, but I think in general, it just overall made it that much more of a well-rounded piece of cinema. And well-rounded story. It was a long, poetic epic split into 6 parts that are actually distinguishable from each other, and with each part building on the last in an almost episodic fashion, like a series. The evolution of cinema over the last decade has shifted the consumer needs into a more televisual format. So anyone acting like, holy shit, a 4-hour fucking movie, that same person goes home and binge watches 4 episodes of a TV show they like, spends the same amount of time, and doesn't complain. So we definitely need to stop dismissing long movies in general, right? In this age, where clearly longer is better, not always, but it's what we want more. We want longer things. With that being said, longer isn't always better, but in this case, it really benefited Snyder's cut. The way he structured the film allowed it to breathe after the clear big plot moments, which was basically any time a part ended, that was an indication of like a plot point. The final scene of a part was a plot point, big plot point. And I think that whole structure allowed them to kind of build to a conclusion in an effective way and spend an effective amount of time on the conclusion. You get a lot of kind of your own part, for the conclusion. And then you get a whole epilogue. You spend the right amount of time on the character arcs, on the plot threads, and it was satisfying. It was. The conclusion gets to have a great amount of time, really, not just action-packed, but closing the arcs of each character in a way. Not closing like indefinitely, but closing what was brought up in the beginning. The arc that's presented to us for each character in the beginning is closed in a way in the end. It's structured in a way as well where if you wanted to, you could pause a part. You could pause at part 3 or whatever and pick up with that part, the next part that you left off on the next day. It's like it's structured in a way that if you're more into like TV, you can watch this that way if you want to. And I like that too. I think that benefited it. It really just suits the watching habits of a lot of people these days. I admittedly had to do this myself even. I ran out of time on the first day I was watching it, and then I stopped at part 5, and then I watched the last part in the epilogue the next day. I wanted to watch it in one sitting, because I prefer that, but I ran out of time. But overall, the story. Let's talk about why it worked. Why it was better than the 2017 version, and why, in my opinion, it's not an amazing film, as some people will have you believe, but it is really good. Okay, it's good. Immediately, this film is going to work because of how much time we spend with each character, and pretty much equally. We have not one protagonist, but 6, and they are all fleshed out in an extremely impactful and emotional way. There were some emotional scenes. Even Superman, Clark Kent scenes really hit me. I feel like I learned more about this version of Bruce Wayne than I otherwise would have if all we ever got was the 2017 version. But also just characters that we've now gotten to know better over the years, like Diana, like Arthur. They still managed to be fleshed out even more, to the point where understanding Arthur's disdain towards Atlantis and Diana's motivation in general were heightened and building upon the solo movies we've already seen. And you have to remember that Diana was introduced to us for the first time in Batman vs. Superman, not in a solo film. And Aquaman was first introduced to us in Justice League, not in his solo film. I think if we had gotten Zack's version right away, the depth to the characters would have only made their solo films that much better, and it does make their solo films that much better now that we do have the version we were supposed to get. For Diana, what was most fun was she felt more evolved. She felt like a legend, a veteran of heroics, which is what she should be at this point in her arc. She's been around a while. Her solo films take place before this, before modern day. She's been around a lot longer than all of these guys. Yeah, she's the oldest of all of them, and she feels like a legend and a veteran. She feels more like the leader of this group than Batman or Superman do. She's the one we've spent the most time with too. We've yeah, she's a great character that we've spent 4 films with now. Technically 5 if you count both versions of this movie. and and I think her solo films were heightened in the regard to the depth of her character in this movie. Arthur's conflicts with his mother and Atlantis are all things we learned and things that we saw him grow from in his solo film. But his arc in this picture further heightened his backstory so that when watching his solo film now, I really feel like I understand him even more deeply than perhaps I already did. So this is what I mean by depth of character. The depth of character is really what made this movie work the way it did. It's why it was really good. As for the characters that we've spent less time with, they have as much depth here as you would want, as if they had solo movies. And Barry and Victor are good. I think Victor, most of all, is who I'm talking about. I feel like, you know, they feel like genuine people to me now, whereas in the other version they were kind of just brushed upon real quick. They feel like real people that we can relate to now. That's what this movie did to those characters, for those characters. It makes me more excited to see them both again in the upcoming Flash movie. I think they are both in that. I think Victor Stone is in the Flash movie. So, and he's, by the way, Ray Fisher's open to doing a solo movie too. He said he would want Zack Snyder involved, of course, if he did it. Then we have Clark and Bruce, guys who are supposed to be the leaders, right? Guys who we've spent a good deal of time with and who are technically leaders of this group. Building on their dynamic from Batman vs. Superman was even well heightened in this, while also individually allowing them to grow. Clark's return was emotional because I believed his angst with a sudden return, having to understand himself all over again, but also he had to grow beyond that understanding too. In this movie, I think he did both of those things. Remembering who he is, what his purpose is, and then evolving. Hence, even I thought the decision of the black-suited Superman, this is my take on it, okay? I think it was actually very effective because, in my opinion, it symbolizes the next step of his evolution. Whereas the S always means hope, right? The colors mean something. The colors that he picked, red and blue, meant hope for Earth. That was the red and blue. The black, which is more closely compared to the original color of his father from Krypton, that symbolizes hope for everyone. So I think him picking the black suit is, now I'm a symbol of hope for the universe or the galaxy or whatever, for everybody that needs protection from this threat. That was, in my opinion, why the black-suited Superman made the most sense. And Bruce Wayne, this version of him feels more like an embodiment of all iterations of the character. Seeing a Bruce Wayne in this state, in this time in his career as the vigilante, was somehow more effective in this than in his previous times on screen. So seeing a veteran Bruce Wayne felt more normal, having seen so many young rehashes of the character. But we understand Bruce Wayne more than any of these characters because, including all the other versions of him, we've spent the most time with Bruce Wayne, with Batman. Think about how many Batman movies there have been. So it was important to have that character presented to us differently than before. And I think it was done more effectively in this than if we had only ever just gotten that one 2017 version of Justice League and Batman vs. Superman. We would always be disappointed with Ben Affleck's Bruce Wayne. I am less disappointed with Ben Affleck's Bruce Wayne now. It only feels right that this version would be a weathered one. It takes the character in a new direction and made the character more fleshed out on screen. In ways, this film even helped heightened parts of Batman versus Superman, mostly because the growth of Bruce, Clark, and Diana from that film is resonant. There's no denying the character development was what I think made the film work. If it was just a lot more action sequences and less character moments, it would not have worked. We'd be saying, oh, it's just an extended version of the 2017 version. But with that being said, I still have a hard time with DC's approach to their films. Sometimes it's tough. That's basically just because in the beginning I was a little confused with some things. It's become clear at this point that they are taking a multiverse approach to their films, meaning some are connected while others aren't. And an idea that they are planning to flesh out with films like The Flash. So, The Flash, Supergirl, any Aquaman sequel, any Wonder Woman sequel, those are part of this continuity, right? But then we have them actually taking an approach with the multiverse by having characters like Michael Keaton's Batman showing up in The Flash. That right there, or the fact that Ezra Miller's Flash showed up in The Flash on the TV show The Flash, it's clear that they're taking a multiverse approach 100% now, and as long as they do it, they execute it properly, it'll heighten this whole universe in general. It'll make it better. Yeah, I'll actually be able to get on board with it a little more. But there's still some continuity confusion that I want to mention. So, like, in the beginning, I really did try and remember where this film took place, where it picks up from, whether or not characters had died in previous films. I was actually like, where is Anatope from Wonder Woman? I don't remember, like, if she died, or, like, why wasn't she in this? Like, just some continuity questions. But maybe that's just because I haven't watched them enough or whatever. But, yeah. And then you got Joker showing up the way he did. But I'll talk about the epilogue in depth a little bit. I was just confused about some of the villains, whether or not I'd seen them before. Where did I see them before? The MacGuffins. Did I see the MacGuffins before? And I had to remember what films came out before this and when those films took place to really grasp where we were and what the state of things were sometimes. It's one of the few problems with re-releasing a film from 2017, but whatever. Continuity-wise, when we've had other films since then, and the main timeline of those films have continued, it just made it a little hard to, like, be like, what came out after this, what came out before this? Because there are things in the beginning that you have to kind of, work through on your, in your head and be like, okay, this is where we're at, and let's take it from here. Because you're asking fans to go backwards, and it just gets a little confusing. It's not really something that affects the film as an individual story, though. So that's not even. It's whatever. I think something that did affect the individual story, something I had a problem with sometimes, was that there were scenes and moments that were thrown in by Snyder that had no real purpose for being there other than to be literal fan service. But I don't think it hurt the plot, though. That's what was so brilliant about what Snyder did here. Throwing Martian Manhunter in the film for 2 seconds was okay, cool, but pointless and otherwise confusing. Like, you see him again at the end, but he shows up in the middle there, and you're like, why, dude? Who is this? And what's his purpose? And you're wondering, does he have a purpose in the overall story? He ends up not having a purpose. So it was kind of just pointless for him to be there. The whole epilogue we'll talk about. Because we had, even before the epilogue, we have moments with Green Lanterns popping up in flashbacks. Makes me wonder what's going to happen there. Joker's moment in the film was honestly the most poorly constructed scene. No real reason for it. The whole epilogue is really kind of just a fan servicey melting pot, right? And it's also not like the villains were compelling either in the movie. So just a couple of problems I had. Very one-dimensional villains. Not even they were more fleshed out. Steppenwolf was more fleshed out, but Darkseid and it's just their motivations very bland. And that's something the DC films don't need any more of. We are constantly throwing those kind of fucking villains. There has been no villain except for Joker, and not even this Joker, that I have been utterly compelled with. Yeah, so there's that. I was impressed with both the poeticism of certain moments where we took a break from the action and really felt a scene or action or a line of dialogue, but also visually, the cinematography and choice of shot progressions is nothing short of Snyder's visionary nature. What was most interesting in terms of visuals was his choice to release the film in the classical Academy standard of the 50s. He went with a 4.3 aspect ratio that was both risky and turned out to be appealing. It was actually cool. It's actually officially the first superhero film to ever be released in that format. And I love Snyder's reasoning for it. He said something about how superheroes are very vertical in nature, not horizontal. They are a presence that deserves more emphasis in height rather than width. They are grandiose, like the gods of great power, and therefore should be framed as such. So that was cool. That was very cool. Again, benefited this. Zack wanted to aesthetically make a point with his decision, which I greatly appreciated and respected. There's no denying that it is an epic, like a great, almost Shakespearean drama. The fleshing out of the world was most effective, giving more context to the environment of our heroes, where they come from, what they do, while also giving context to why the conflict of the film was happening and what it really was. That was good. But what was most epic about this film was actually Zack Snyder's journey to make it overall. It was a long, hard, and painful journey that finally came to fruition. In a way, things happen for a reason too, not to make light of what he went through, but having it released now, the way it was on HBO Max, all it took to get here really kind of benefited it. If it's released in 2017, most likely it's not this version, and maybe it's not as good. Seeing Zack's full and complete vision come to life is what made it as good as it was. It also further fuels the discussion of art versus commerce in a way, of course. Better always to be the discussion, not the, better discussion of art and commerce, not versus commerce, which for the most part it is. Artists and studios do tend to make it work. But every now and then you hear about a studio butchering a project. Point in case with this. What they did to it in 2017. At least they made it right here, but yeah, it's worth thinking about. Let the artist run with his vision when you're making a movie, and you'll more than likely actually get a better result. Maybe not. In 2017, Snyder and his wife, and Chris Nolan too, as a producer, and other creative members of this team, spent all this time and all this money and all these resources on making this film. Tragically, and unfortunately, the Snyders had to step away from the film after the unexpected death of their daughter. Warner Brothers then put the film on a fast-track production to get finished and released, and hired Joss Whedon, director of the Avengers movies, to get the job done. Instead of honoring Snyder's vision, the studio and Whedon butchered the film. Deborah Snyder sat down at the screening for it and was devastated to see the result. She advised Zack not to watch it, and to this day he has not seen the cut from 2017. The fans were to thank in a lot of ways as well, because they demanded the cut that was initially meant for them. After finally getting the go-ahead from the studio, Zack and his team went back to work, not only polishing what they had, but also shooting some new material too, to make his vision come finally to life. It was a long road, but it's here, and I'm glad I was surprised and entertained by what I saw. It's clear Zack has always had a particular perspective on these characters and this universe, with ideas for the future of the franchise still running through his head. The question now is, does a Snyderverse have a second chance at coming to fruition? He certainly sets up a much larger narrative for these characters and this universe, with the unnecessarily long epilogue, but nonetheless stirs excitement. Will it happen? Fans have been now like seriously tweeting and petitioning for the Snyderverse to continue. Justice League 2, Justice League 3. Snyder has plans for them. Will it happen? Actually, there's a possibility it can now because of this release. My rating. Depth of character and plot, along with effective set pieces and visual choices, allowed for an overall success, despite some connectivity hiccups and unnecessary scenes. I give it an 8.5 out of 10 overall. It was really good. My first official really good rating. I'm going to change up my rating system a tad, just for some movies that are a little more good than regular good. You know what I mean? Like, this was better than, like, The Gentleman. You know, like, this was really good. The Gentleman was good. You know what I mean? Like, something like that. I'm going to change my ratings as a little bit. 8.5. Really good movie. In my opinion, of course. But, please, if you haven't seen it yet, it's worth it for the visual and cinematic experience of it.